Okay, eyes up front, we're about to hear about the hunger crisis in Africa. Here we go.
Okay, so we are here today to talk about a very serious issue, which is hunger and starvation in a third world country, namely the country of Eritrea.
In recent years, Eritrea has undergone a food crisis that the Global Hunger Index describes as extremely alarming.
Okay, so Eritrea is located on the eastern seaboard of the Horn of Africa. It is situated between the Red Sea, the Sudan, and Ethiopia. Both the Sudan and Ethiopia are also African countries with serious food crises.
The economy of Eritrea is derived mostly from agriculture, something that hasn't benefited the country in recent years.
Is this more than 20 seconds? I think more than 20 seconds here.
Let's check your transitions. Oh, that's because the transitions aren't set.
I said
Well, I believe you. I just, it's the notes out right here.
Flip the slide over.
Yeah, you can apply to all.
Apply to all is
On
where?
the left.
To the left.
To the left.
I swear I said
Okay, we're just gonna wait a second till it goes through this one, and when you're ready, you move on to the next one.
I blame the equipment.
There we go.
So Eritrea is a very new country, having broken off from the bigger country of Ethiopia in only 1991.
Tumult between the newborn country and Ethiopia broke out in 1998. This war lasted for about 2 years and was known as the Ethiopia-Eritrea War.
Even after the war, relations between Ethiopia and Eritrea have been tense. Since the United States is allied to both Eritrea and Ethiopia, it has made relations to both a little difficult.
Widespread controversies rage about whom the U.S. should help and even which country actually requires help.
The entire Horn of Africa is currently experiencing a devastating drought. This drought has had disastrous effects on the agriculture countries such as Eritrea and Ethiopia require.
The UN World Food Program is feeding 17 million people in the Horn of Africa, which is still recovering from its worst humanitarian crisis since 1984.
Available data indicates that in the best of seasons, Eritrea can produce at most 60 to 80% of its national food requirements. And when drought strikes, the production can fall to as low as 25% of national consumption. That's from unocha.com.
And about on average, 1 every 3 years is a drought year.
The drought and the general poverty of the country has led to an intense lack of food in Eritrea. As said before, the country cannot produce the food required for its survival, even in the best of scenarios.
Widespread and disastrous lack of food has led to images such as this being commonplace. Water and food are basic necessities forgone by the Eritrean people.
The UN World Food Program, the WFP, has warned that over 12 million people in Eritrea and Ethiopia are threatened with starvation. This statistic is from more than 10 years ago.
And things have hardly gotten better for them. The threat of starvation from 12 years ago still remains just as prevalent today.
The Eritrean people use the nakfa as currency. Each nakfa is worth about 6 US cents each. The average Eritrean makes only about 6,100 nakfa each year, the WorldBank.com.
This low income has made basic food necessities almost impossible to obtain. Vegetables cost up to 50 nakfa, and meat up to 250 per kilogram, and chicken up to 400.
Economic freedom in Eritrea has stabled off in the past few years at around 40% of the population. This does not mean that the country is doing all right. Quite to the contrary, UNOCHA recently stated that poverty is high, with 66% of the population estimated as poor, and 37% of the poor living below the poverty line.
Another paradoxical fact about Eritrea is the gross domestic product rate, which is increasing higher than most. Despite this, it is still overly undeveloped and about 177th out of 187 nations.
The Eritrean's political leader goes by the name of Isaias Afewerki. It's a mouthful. He was elected in office in the National Assembly in 1993.
Afewerki has been accused of suppressing democracy, and indeed, since his election, more than 20 years ago, he has run a one-party state, failed to implement democratic reforms, and shut down the private press.
Despite the critical situation of his country, Afewerki has repeatedly declined foreign aid, stating that he doesn't believe in it or that his country doesn't require it.
In a long-shot statement, Afewerki said he rejected general food distribution because a few have tended to use relief assistance as a political tool and in a manner that would ultimately perpetuate dependency rather than eliminating it.
Compared to other countries, Eritrea is in a desperate situation, with drinking water available to only about 57% of its people, and sanitation for up to only 9%. This impoverished country is in seriously dire straits.
Though Eritrea is not the hungriest country in the world, it makes a close second, and is significantly higher on the list than Ethiopia.
In this graph, the amount of starving people in Eritrea is calculated to be about 35% of the population, a startling and horrifying statistic.
The hunger faced in Eritrea is devastating beyond measures. In many ways, it is relatable to the food insecurity crisis currently raging in America, but on a much larger and much more dangerous scale.
Even Eritrea's deluded government has stated that Eritrea has suffered greatly from the negative effects of climate variability, recurring drought, and food insecurity, from IRN News.
Several organizations have attempted to help with the world hunger issues prevalent in Eritrea. In fact, the World Food Program currently represents approximately 50% of the total food aid provided in Eritrea, or nearly 33% of Eritrea's estimated food requirement.
Based off our research, we believe the best possible way to help those suffering from hunger in Eritrea is to create more aid programs that specifically target hunger in Eritrea.
And raise awareness to the significance and the hunger that is prevalent in Eritrea.
Eritrean hunger and its end comes down to a series of balanced factors. The aid programs must contain at least some promotion of self-sustainability in Eritrea.
Programs must respect the government's wishes, but also save lives. Finally, a balance between maintaining a beneficial relationship and necessity of the problem must be found.
From breaking off and forming its own nation to fighting vicious wars with its neighbors, Eritrea has undergone numerous hardships over the past few decades.
To further worsen the situation, the drought that struck Eritrea years ago and continues to strike repeatedly has left the country vulnerable and caused its people to suffer through an extremely alarming starvation.
Question for, let's say, Patrick. What strategies did the two of you use to gather your information or conduct your research, and did those strategies work effectively for you?
Well, we searched a lot of, just places, we didn't just go and type in, hunger in Eritrea, but we tried to find, the prevalence of hunger in places. So we looked at, the global hunger index and tried to figure out, where was it, and, the economy of it, and, agriculture, and we found it rather effective.
Chris, how did your solution, which was the balance of all the different things you talked about, how did that fit in or conflict with the other solutions you found out there in your research?
Well, the other solutions were more like Red Cross and national food health programs, where they're more specifically directed at hunger in general. But since we were focusing more on solving just Eritrean hunger specifically, and since it's such a serious problem with number 2 in the most hungry nations on the food index, I thought that it would be more effective to have systems that targeted Eritrea specifically instead of just general food, and that raised awareness for Eritrea, and that because the government was so they didn't want to accept the food programs. One of their reasons was that it inspired dependency. I felt that if the system inspired more self-dependency, then it would be more accepted.
Nice job.